Hello, welcome to Liberty Wolf. My name is Zach Strong. This is the 11th episode of my podcast. Welcome. Today we will be talking about the right to keep and bear arms. If you go to my website, theamericancitadel.com, I have a couple different articles that you might find interesting on the same topic. We constantly are hearing the screech of the leftists, progressives, communists, socialists, and that whole crowd of anti-American traitors that the guns need to be taken away. Some of them outright say, we need to take the guns. All of them. Other people, they're a little more tactful and they'll deceptively say, oh, we just need to regulate this type of gun or take away that type of weapon or just have this law and make it difficult for people to have guns because that would deter the criminals. Of course, all of this logic is completely insane. It's illogical. Criminals, people who are going to murder people, they don't care about the law. I mean, if really all you need to do is pass a law, why don't we have a law against murder? Oh, wait, we do. And yet people are murdering each other constantly. So a law doesn't do anything. A new law won't help save one single life, period. Okay, so let's get that ridiculous, erroneous, juvenile, infantile idea out of our mind. It's just childish in the extreme to think, oh, we can just pass a law and suddenly the murderers and the criminals won't murder and commit crime. I don't know how that makes sense to anyone, yet all it is pure emotionalism. And that's what communism does best. Get people to have this knee-jerk emotional response. Oh no, some kids got killed by an evil person. Oh, we have to take all the guns from everyone. That's the kind of irrational response they have. And they make it sound so horrible. Oh, these children, of course, it's terrible. But, because of these children dying, and they hold these children out, their pictures constantly, and make sure you know they're children, they're children, they're children. So you have all these emotions well up inside you. And so it overrides your reasoning ability in your mind. This is how they operate. This is how the controlled press and the establishment and all these traitorous politicians, this is how they operate. We instead, though, should have the ability to reason and look at things logically. Look at the facts, look at the evidence. If something's a right, you can't just take it away. Unless someone has committed a crime, then that individual who committed the crime, then they forfeit their rights. If an individual violates the equal rights of another person, then they can have their individual right taken away because they forfeited by their act. However, you cannot then punish an entire group because of the sin of one individual. We don't have group rights. There's no such thing as group rights. There are individual, personal, God-given rights that each person has. And so you cannot punish one whole group or an entire nation because one person, or maybe a couple different people, or maybe even an organization or like a terrorist group, because they do something horrible, you can't punish everyone else. That's not how rights work. That's the mindset of, oh, this is only a privilege. If it was a privilege and government gave us our privilege to keep and bear arms, well then sure, then it's completely arbitrary anyway because it's just a privilege, and so government can do whatever they want to. But it's not a privilege, it's a right. And what makes it a right? What makes it a God-given natural right that you and I have to keep and bear arms? Well, the very fact that God gave us liberty. That, therefore, gives us the right to defend that liberty. And let's make this very clear. This is not about guns. It has absolutely zero, zilch, nada, zip, nothing to do with guns. Period. Nothing to do with guns whatsoever. Before guns existed, did we have a right to defend ourselves? Of course, before guns were ever invented, human beings had the right to defend their liberty, the right to defend their families, the right to defend their property. They did it with sticks and stones, they did it with swords, pitchforks, whatever. They had a right to do it. And if one day in the future, say 1,000 years from now, guns are obsolete and we all have lasers or whatever, will that right still exist? Of course, because it has nothing to do with guns. It has everything to do with liberty and defending our rights. So let's please stop talking about guns. That is a distraction, a very harmful, damaging distraction. This is not about guns. It's not about arms even. Though arms is just a broad term suggesting weapons. In fact, the way arms was used by the founding fathers in the Bill of Rights, they referred to military-grade weapons, the best of the best. The average American man had military-grade weaponry back in the day. In fact, even until after World War II, local counties still had caches full of military weapons that were accessible to the public. But today, the government doesn't trust us with weapons, which should tell you a whole heck of a lot about the intentions of our government. The fact that they don't trust the people with arms is very, very worrying, because that means they are not trustworthy. The government, that is. It means they have designs upon our liberty. It means there's a calculated scheme behind all this, because they should have nothing to hide. In fact, they should want the American people to have guns. It's an added protection to the nation. Anywhere people have a lot of guns, crime is lower. That's just a fact. Yeah. Sorry. Just stumbling over my words here. A statistical fact. So please, again, let's stop talking about the guns, though. The guns is not the issue when we're dealing with rights. Again, Adam, first man on earth, he had the right to defend himself. He didn't have guns, so it's not about guns. As far as I'm concerned, Joe down the street, he should be able to have a Sherman tank if he wants one. If he thinks that's what he needs to defend his family, by all means, have a Sherman tank. If Bob across the street needs a machine gun, great. That's wonderful. Have a machine gun. If I think I need landmines in my yard, okay, good. Then I will use landmines and put them in my yard. To a lot of people, that will seem extreme. But yet again, come on, we're dealing with rights here. The right is nothing to do with guns. The right is about your ability to defend yourself, your liberty, your family, your property. It doesn't matter whether that's with a rocket-propelled grenade, with a shotgun, with a pistol, with an old-time musket, with a sword, or with a rock. You can defend yourself by any means, period. This is not that hard of a concept, folks. So let's stop. We're doing ourselves a disservice by making this all about guns. It's not about guns. It's about our God-given right. Maybe I'm harping on that a little too much, but I hope the point is getting across here. It's not about the guns. Technology changes, but rights don't. Remember that. So I'm going to read you what the Bill of Rights actually says. The Second Amendment here. Quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Close quote. So the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There's some people who, some so-called scholars and other uninformed types who will look at that and say, oh no, this only means the militia can have guns or the state can have guns. It doesn't mean the individual person can have guns. This is another way they've tried to twist the reality. The reality is so far different than that. It's actually quite laughable. Such a person is either uninformed or completely ignorant. Those are the only two options. You can't be an honest and informed individual and actually believe that. It's impossible. Yes, militias are supposed to be armed, but so are the individual people, individual citizens. I'm going to read another thing here from the U.S. Constitution that no one wants to they don't want to read it. Why don't you want to read it? This is what the supreme law of the land. It tells us all about our rights. It tells us the duties of Congress. It tells us the duties and rights, responsibilities of the president. It tells us what they have to do to protect us. It tells us what they do for us. It tells us what they cannot do. For example, they cannot infringe upon our rights to keep and bear arms. Shall not be infringed, right? Okay, then you have this right here, Article 1 of the Constitution, talking about the duties of Congress. This is one of the duties of Congress that has been forgotten. This is a way that Congress is violating the Constitution. Quote, to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. Close quote. Have you ever really thought about that one before? That Congress has an enumerated duty, a specifically spelled out duty to provide organizing, arming, and disciplining local state militias. Did you know that? And that these militias are supposed to be funded and armed by the federal government. However, the officers and the people in charge, they're going to be appointed by the states. I mean, this is a beautiful bulwark against a tyrannical government, against a government that would ever use a standing army against people. Well, it doesn't matter how strong a standing army is. If all 50 states had a militia that was well armed, that was disciplined, that was trained with local leaders appointed by the states, it could never take over this country, ever. It would never happen. And so Congress has been very careful to not fulfill this duty, to not arm state militias. And the National Guard, let's be honest here, the National Guard is not the militia system. It's a National Guard. It's just another wing of the military. Now, some people might try to squabble about that, but come on, let's be honest. That's the truth of it. You know, a militia in Texas could be called out to Georgia for whatever reason, to help with floods or any other stupid thing. But that's not how this is supposed to work. It's a state militia. Now, if there's a national crisis, then that part of the militia that is in service to the United States, then they are controlled during that skirmish, during that war, by the federal government. But all other times, the actual leaders, the officers, are appointed by the states. And so, do you know of any state that has a militia that is funded by the federal government with officers appointed by the state government? I don't know of one. If there's one of them, please write me an email. Let me know, because I've never heard of it in my lifetime. Yeah, this is how it's supposed to be. But see, again, people take this and they twist it and say, see, yeah, it's only supposed to be the militia to have guns. But again, let's disabuse ourselves of that notion right now by reading some quotes from these founding fathers, the same people who put together these laws. James Madison in the Federalist Papers, number 46. This is a pretty famous one. I'm just going to take a couple quotes about the importance of people having guns. He says, besides the advantage of being armed, which the Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation, the existence of subordinate governments to which the people are attached and by which the militia officers are appointed forms a barrier against the enterprises of ambition more insurmountable than any which a simple government of any form can admit of. Then it later goes on and says that the governments of Europe, the bloated militaristic governments of Europe, quote, are afraid to trust the people with arms. The people with arms, again, not the state with arms, not a wing of the state, not an organization controlled by the state, but the people. The people. You know, a tyrannical government, like those in Europe, they're afraid to trust the people with arms, with guns, with weaponry. The United States government, however, at least as originally founded by the wonderful founding fathers, it was completely willing to have the American people have guns. But why? It's not necessarily they, I don't know, trusted them implicitly. It was that they understood it was a right that people have. That any free person has the right to have a weapon to defend his other rights. And that's the purpose again, is to defend rights. So I'm going to take some quotes here from this book, The Second Amendment Primer. One of the best books written on the Second Amendment, written by Les Adams for Palladium Press. So I'm going to read some quotes here. Really great. First one's by Thomas Paine. Quote, the peaceable part of mankind will be continually overrun by the vile and abandoned, while they neglect the means of self-defense. The supposed quietude of a good man allures the ruffian, while on the other hand, arms, like laws, discourage and keep the invader and the plunderer in awe, and preserve order in the world as well as property. The balance of power is the scale of peace. The same balance would be preserved were all the world destitute of arms, for all would be alike. But since some will not, and others dare not lay them aside, horrid mischief will ensue were one half of the world deprived of the use of them. The weak will become prey to the strong. Close quote. In this case, the strong, they're talking about these ruffians in the same sort of context here. That, you know, this argument's used a lot by people like me who defend the right to keep and bear arms, the right of self-defense, because it's absolutely true. Good people, they follow the law, right? But evil people, they don't. So you make a law saying people can have guns. It doesn't deter the criminal. It doesn't deter anyone who's crazy enough to murder someone. It doesn't deter them. If they don't have a gun, they'll grab a knife. Or if they can't legally acquire a gun, they'll go to the black market. I mean, that's just how it works. Good people, though, however, they will try to follow the law, and so they're going to be the ones punished because they're going to be left defenseless against these ruffians, against these people with stronger weaponry, against these people who disregard the law and common sense and order and civility anyway. You're never going to do away with the evil people. Just simple as that. So since evil people do exist, and since evil people will murder at times, then good people, in order to defend themselves, have to have a means of defending themselves. And the best means so far invented are guns. But again, whether it's a Stone Age or 100,000 years in the future, this right will still exist because it's about defending ourselves against evil people, whether in government or some gang member on the street trying to rob you. It's about self-defense here. Thomas Jefferson, some people will try to quote him a lot and say, oh, look, it's only supposed to be, only militias are supposed to have guns. Well, maybe they ignore these quotes here. Quote, a strong body makes a strong mind. As to the species of exercise, I advise the gun. While this gives moderate exercise to the body, it gives boldness, enterprise, and independence to the mind. Games played with the ball and others of that nature are too violent for the body and stamp no character on the mind. Let your gun, therefore, be the constant companion of your walks. Close quote. So if your gun is your constant companion on your walks, in other words, if you're intimately acquainted with the guns and have them on your person and have them around you, does that suggest that the militia only has the right to these arms? Of course not. He's referring to individual private citizens. If that wasn't clear enough, here's another quote from Jefferson. Quote, no free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms. Close quote. Here's an even more famous quote. He said this, what country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The remedy is to set them right as to facts, pardon and pacify them. What signify a few lives lost in a century or two? The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is nature's manure. Close quote. So the people have to have guns. It says the people. Free men, the average citizens. They have a right to have guns, if for no other reason than to remind the government that we'll overthrow you if you try to tyrannize us. This is what the founding fathers did against the British government, which was a tyrannical monarchy that was abusing Americans. We decided we had enough of this, and thankfully, our founding fathers had guns. So they said, lock and load, we're not going to take this anymore. The blood of tyrants will fertilize American liberty, and that's exactly what happened. Here's another quote from another fiery speaker, considered the best orator of the day, Patrick Henry. He said, the militia, sir, is our ultimate safety. We can have no security without it. The great object is that every man be armed. Everyone who is able may have a gun. Close quote. Later on, he went and he said this, also another very poignant, informative quote. He said, let him candidly tell me, where and when did freedom exist when the sword and purse were given up from the people? Unless a miracle in human affairs interposed, no nation ever retained its liberty after the loss of the sword and the purse. Close quote. So the purse here refers to, of course, the control of our money. And the sword obviously refers to the right of self-defense. Perhaps it's sad to relate, or perhaps it's surprising to some people, I should say, that the American people have already given up the right to control their money. They've already given up the purse. In 1913, the Federal Reserve, which is not federal and has no reserves. It's not a branch of the federal government whatsoever. It's not a department, not an organization. It's a privately held, privately owned bank. In 1913, the Federal Reserve took control of the American money system. They gave themselves the right to print the currency whenever the heck they wanted to. And the heads of the Federal Reserve have openly, on record, on video, you can go look these videos up on YouTube if you want. If you don't believe me, go look it up. They've openly said, we're not accountable to Congress, we're not accountable to anyone. Congress, remember, represents the American people. So what they're saying is we're not accountable to anyone. The American people, go screw you. We can print any money we want to. And so all this debt that America has, most of it's been accrued by the Federal Reserve, which is a privately held bank. It's not a public institution. So all this debt doesn't actually belong to us. It belongs to the Federal Reserve, as a private bank. They should be the ones that have to pay for it, not the American people. So this ridiculous monstrosity, this Federal Reserve, they just print money all they want, and then they spend it on whatever they want. In fact, they give billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars to Europe and all sorts of other countries to help prop them up, to prop up all these ridiculous socialist regimes. And then the American people get the tab, and we have to pay for it. And then our currency is inflated, and we have to pay more through hidden inflation taxes. And then we have to pay more for taxes to pay for all these programs and everything. And yet it's not even the American people's debt. It's the Federal Reserve, the private Federal Reserve. So we've given up the control of our money already. What about the sword? Have we given up the sword yet? In some aspects, yes, we have. We have given up certain rights relative to our weapons. Remember, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Period. And put an exclamation point or two. This is straightforward command language. It's a command to the government. You shall not infringe upon this right. Period. You will not. You shall not. You cannot. You have no authority to infringe upon this right. You have no authority to pass any law whatsoever that restricts in any degree, in any manner, in any way, shape, or form, this right of the people, the American people, the individuals that constitute the American people, to keep, to have, possess, to bear, to use arms, weapons. The supreme reason being so that these people can defend, protect, and secure, safeguard their rights, their liberties. Those very liberties that the Constitution is designed to protect and ensure. And yet, every time there's any sort of a shooting anywhere, especially if it's a school shooting, if there are children involved, if a black man gets shot, then they can blame it on a white guy. Here come the media. With they have the script that they use every time. They just roll it back out each time. They have the same talking points year after year, year after year, year after year. It goes on and on and on. Take the guns, take them away. You even have people in Congress and all over the government saying, yes, we should do that. Dianne Feinstein, her famous quote, Mr. and Mrs. America, turn them all in. Remember that one? She said, if I could, I would have taken all of them. All the guns. I mean, people like her, these communists and these socialists who pretend they're Democrats and they love the people. No, they actually don't love the American people. They're traitors. They're enemies to the Republic because they want to destroy the rights guaranteed to us by our forefathers, guaranteed to us by God. They don't love the children. These children who die in school shootings and whatnot, they're just pawns. They're political pawns being used. Their bodies are figuratively being held out there for everyone to see so we can be beat over the head with these unfortunate, tragic deaths so that we will feel so sad we'll give up our rights. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not what true patriots do. True patriots, first of all, don't use those sorts of arguments. And true patriots don't relinquish their rights because someone else happened to make a mistake or use their agency badly. That's not how it works. That's not how freedom works. God-given rights don't work that way. Let's also pull something else out here in the open that's, a lot of people won't say. A few people now and again have the courage to say it, but the only thing holding back the tide of communist tyranny in the world are the armed American people. We're the last hurdle. Most of the rest of the world has been enslaved and subjugated. Most of the world can't have guns. And those places that do, like Mexico, are the most violent places on earth. It's complete anarchy because no one has morals and they're run by gangs and these communist gangsters have already taken over long ago. And so they're fine with people shooting and killing each other as long as they're not armed against the government, right? But here in America, we actually have a segment of the population who understands why we have the right to keep and bear arms, why the Constitution is important, and who believe that we should have a free government, that we should have a republic, not a democracy, not some other international government, but a republic, a constitutional, confederated republic, where individuals have the right to do whatever they want to, so long as they don't step on the rights of other people. And this is completely anathema to the communist agenda of taking over the world. So these, people call them progressives, liberals, whatever. They're communists. Look at their principles. They're communists. Talk about this in past podcasts. And so these people want to disarm us because they know that we're the last hurdle. The Christian, mostly white, conservative base of America, we're the last hurdle. And sometimes people say that an armed society is a polite society. And to a degree that's true, but I want to add a qualifying remark. An armed and righteous society is a polite society. So we're becoming increasingly wicked, and so we're a powder keg. We're a very well-armed powder keg. And so if we don't turn to God, if we don't, return to our roots as a nation, this constitutionalism, if we don't understand what our founding fathers envisioned for this country, if we don't understand the Constitution and the rights guaranteed to us in that document or by that document, then what are we? We're a nation that is like anyone else in the world. Just a bunch of people trying to, fight each other for power. So it's these international gangsters have used this divide and conquer strategy against us. And so the people that they target the most, though, are the white Christian conservatives, or constitutionalists. I prefer the term constitutionalist. And especially the ones with arms. We have to be defeated if their agenda is going to work. Because America can't be taken down unless the people who are armed are completely disarmed. And the world won't completely fall unless America falls. So, you get down to the root of it, then you have to attack the people who are holding up America still. And that's the armed group of people. People both armed in physical arms and armed in righteousness in the Lord's cause. And so all these principles kind of coalesce together. And we need to remember, though, that it's not just the right of a militia to have guns. It's not just the right of the U.S. military to have weapons to defend the nation. It's an individual right. And if some of the quotes I read earlier were not clear enough, I have one final quotation. This comes from John Adams. He said in his treatise that he wrote, A Defense of the Constitutions of the United States, he said this, quote, "Arms in the hands of individual citizens may be used at individual discretion in private self-defense." Close quote. I mean, if that wasn't clear enough, what would be? I mean, thou shalt not infringe upon this right. Shall make no law, right? This sort of language seems not be able to get through to people. But those of us who do understand it, we have an obligation, a moral duty to stand up and make other people aware that this is what our founding fathers really meant. This is what the Constitution really says. This is how these rights work. They're from God. They can't be taken away. Doesn't matter how many shootings happen. Doesn't matter how sympathetic we feel towards victims of evil people. It doesn't matter. Whether you like guns or not, it doesn't matter. Just like whether I like what you have to say, your opinion, that doesn't matter. You have a right to say it, right? Just like I have a right to say my opinion, my point of view. So opinions don't really matter when it comes to God-given, natural, inalienable rights. And that's what we're dealing with here, the right of self-defense, which 100 years from now, or 5,000 years in the past, doesn't matter. We have the same right to defend ourselves and our families. In fact, the Apostle Paul said that those who do not provide for their own family, and I would suggest that that includes self-defense, they're worse than an infidel. So men, in particular, stand up for your families. Stand up for your rights. Stand up like your forefathers. Stand up like they did. Those men who risked their lives, who spilled their blood on this continent to fight the invading British. 2 different times. Stand up like them for our rights. And remember, if they didn't have the guns with which to fight, they wouldn't have been able to secure our rights in the first place. So keep God close and keep your weapons close. God is the one who gave you that right to use that weapon to defend yourself and to defend your right to worship Him. So that's what it's all about rights, God-given rights. Let's remember them, and let's stand up as a people. Let's not allow this tyrannical minority any longer to oppress us, to take away our freedoms, which is what they're doing through banning 3D printed guns, to making gun-free zones, to making it really difficult to own certain types of weapons, to banning certain weapons outright, to making you get a permit and a license to hunt food for your family, and on and on. These people are assaulting the Second Amendment, our right to self-defense, our right to ensure our liberty. Because without this right, the Bolsheviks in this country and around the world who hate us, they're coming for us. The United Nations, which is an abomination, and it's a shame that we allow this foreign, hostile body to exist on our soil. They have that famous statue out front of a pistol, where the barrel is wrapped in a pretzel, basically, symbolizing their hatred of the individual's right to have guns and to defend themselves, because they are so sick and tired of the fact that us white American Christian constitutionalists still have our guns and that we're still clinging to them. Like Obama said, we're the bitter clingers. We're the last hurdle. If we give up, the world goes. Just remember that. And as I sign off, I want you to really think about my catchphrase, because it's never been more applicable. Sic semper tyrannis, long live liberty.